How's everyone doing today? Hopefully everyone's doing well. Um, would love to kind of start this panel with some great people that I've come to know and research for a little bit. And so the first kind of question I'd love for y'all to do is do a quick intro, talk about yourselves, what you do, and how you got into gaming.
Hello. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for coming. My name is Morris. I'm the co-founder of Promodium, which is currently a fully on-chain game that you can play. It's live. Before Promodium, I built a crypto product called Critters, which was basically a play-to-earn version of Minecraft. Unfortunately, Microsoft decided to pull the plug on it, so we moved to building fully on-chain games afterwards. Also figured out a bunch of theses along the way of building that. Before building stuff in crypto, I was your typical B2B SaaS startup founder. We went through YC in summer 2019 and have been building our company since then. And yeah, that's about my career background.
My name is David. I run a venture fund called Dune Ventures. We invest at the intersection of gaming and technology. We do everything from Web3 to VR to AI and all of the above. We've been investing for the last 3 years, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for the introductions, y'all. So I think today's panel will be a really quick chat about things from about on-chain gaming, both from the builders and the investors' perspective, and hopefully we'll have like a casual conversation with some hot takes sprinkled throughout. So yeah, I'd love to first start off with kind of the general kind of questions we were thinking about. I think the first question is just, are on-chain games even made for normal gamers?
For the time being, I don't think so, and I don't think it'll be for for quite a while at the very least. The reason why is just because if you want to get people to play, well, the main reason, in my view, to build an on-chain game is because when you have decentralized scarcity, well, when you have decentralized consensus for every in-game action and every in-game asset, all of these in-game assets and so on have real value. And this is something that people in crypto specifically are happy to ascribe real value to. So kind of like Bitcoin and NFTs and so on, such that normal players, while they can understand that, it will take a lot longer to grok. And so, you can launch a game, put it on like Reddit or put it on Steam or something like that. A lot of people will try it, but like pretty much nobody will bother sticking. Whereas if you give that to a crypto audience, a lot more people will stick. And so it's like, well, at this point, if you're trying to launch to a normal audience and like 99.9% of them churn, then it's a bit of a fool's errand at the moment to focus fully on that.
Yeah, I think the short answer is no. But I think the more interesting question is, what is a gamer? I think if we look back 15 years ago, I think if you had shown mobile games or Candy Crush to a World of Warcraft dev, he would have told you that's not a game. And so the question is, how do we define what a gamer is? And does crypto gaming and crypto gaming audience just change or expand the audience definition? I think that's the more interesting question. So I think the short answer is no. I think crypto games will be an entirely new audience.
Sounds good. And so kind of extrapolating from that kind of crypto gamers being a new audience, I think you've talked a little bit about like normal gamers as well. That was kind of how the framed the initial question. We'd love to kind of see what y'all think like in the next advent of like when on-chain gaming will become a trend or will become some kind of category within gaming. How will a normal gamer ever find an on-chain game? Will it be through do you think traditional platforms will embrace this kind of on-chain game narrative, or will it be like entirely new avenues?
Well, right now, the primary methods of user acquisition for on-chain games and the like is Twitter, right? And Twitter has normal people on it that's not involved in that's not involved in crypto. And so at that point, yeah, I think the traditional channels would be that. But then again, the focus is that do you really need to focus on traditional, as in like non-crypto native people to be playing your game? And I would argue the answer is no, because if you look at DeFi, for example, like there's clearly enough of a market size of people familiar with crypto participating in it, rather than needing to really onboard whoever else that aren't already familiar.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think the interesting thing about crypto is you have entirely new viral distribution mechanisms you can use, right? Which is like Gabe Lin uses this term like free to own, I think it is, and basically using tokens as a way to onboard users. And so I think there's a lot of really novel ways we don't understand today that we'll use to acquire players.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, kind of moving on, I think here's kind of the first kind of question that could lead to some discussion. Think a little bit about like UGC, like user-generated content and stuff like that. How do you solve the dilemma that on-chain games aim to thrive through composability, but players mostly create UGC or user-generated content if the game is already thriving, such as Minecraft or Roblox?
Yeah. So that's actually one of the main reasons why I don't focus on composability for the time being. Like it's something there. It's something people can do. We're built on top of mud, so people can just add more systems and components if they'd like. But that's not the main focus of like why people should play the game. So I think there are a couple of games out there that like they primarily focus on the part that like, oh, you can play this aspect of the game a little bit differently just because like now you can write specific rule sets between players and so on. But as you said, that's not something that players are going to bother doing until like the game is much more advanced, if you will. And so that's why, as I was going back to it, you have to really figure out, well, aside from composability then, what kind of features does an on-chain game provide in terms of like entertainment for players? Like what kind of features does it provide to players such that they can't get anywhere else, so they would come play your on-chain game? In my view, it's basically an in-game economy that is real. So real as in the sense that they are denominated in real value, like Ethereum or USDC or whatever else, and that the game is completely decentralized, such that the economy isn't really owned by anybody, and something that's very similar to EVE, except everything is of real value. This aspect of building an in-game economy is a lot harder to build if the game wasn't on-chain because of regulatory problems, for one. We can dig more into that. And also, the other side is oracles are pretty insecure. And so like when you have an entire game, entire logic on chain, then you can have a much more secure game economy that isn't really as vulnerable.
Nothing to add.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think we could dig into the regulatory side a little bit from both the builder and the investor perspective. You kind of mentioned a little bit about that. What are some of the kind of regulatory kind of insights that you have both as a game builder and also maybe as an investor?
So I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but this is to the best of my understanding as somebody building in the space. So the main reason why most games today don't allow you to cash out, like for example, if you have a sword or something and you get like 40 coins out of it, they don't let you convert that 40 coins into like $40, is because of a thing called money transmission rules. So basically, if the company is the one that's like, you know, if your currency in-game has real value and the company is the one that's helping facilitate the transactions of people getting stuff to one another, this is only pertaining to the US as well. I know we're in France, but as a US company. So you have this money transmission problem that like if your currency is of real value and you're transferring money from one player to another, you'd be considered a money transmitter. The thing about on-chain games is that even if people are transferring assets of real value to players, you are not actually the entity that's doing that for them. The Ethereum network is. So what you are as a game company is more of a peer-to-peer service provider that you link up, you know, two people that want to send stuff to one another, as opposed to you as a company that's facilitating that. Now, that's not to say that like you do that and everything's all fine. Now, obviously, if there are money laundering that's happening on your platform, it doesn't matter if you're not a money transmitter or you don't have to register as one. But yeah, that just means that like compared to a normal game, in terms of regulatory stuff, there's a different architecture that you can do in terms of building the game, such that it doesn't touch on these roles as much. There's a very good article written by Amy Madison, who is talking about Web3 gaming regulatory stuff. I would recommend you guys look it up and read through that.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think the short is we just don't know. Money in games is a very complicated legal topic. Things like skill-based gaming, et cetera, have different regulatory regimes depending on which U.S. state you're in. You need different licenses and opinions. Some traditional gaming companies we work with have to get opinions from 50 plus companies, 50 plus states, and that's just the U.S. and doesn't even include massive countries like China and India. So the TLDR is that it's going to be very complicated. We don't know what it's going to look like. So we're very early.
Also, I'm talking primarily in terms of money transmission because that's what pertains most to the type of game that we want to build in terms of having an economy and having people trade with one another. But there are other considerations like tokens, whether or not they're securities and so on and so forth that fortunately for us, we don't have to think about that too much in terms of the way we're designing our product. But that is also a big topic that isn't covered here yet.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for sharing that kind of perspective. I think we can probably move on to a little bit more of a builder perspective. I think, and obviously, if there's any kind of investor takes on it as well. I think the first question is, what is the hook for on-chain gaming? As a challenge, can you phrase it in a way that does not exist inside the traditional gaming market?
Yeah, so that's going back to what I was kind of hammering on again, which was just that it's the fact that, okay, so the analogy that I like to give is, and Matt Levine and Satoshi has kind of written about this in better terms than I can put, but basically if you have Bitcoin running on one person's computer, it's saying that, I've got 1 Bitcoin, you've got 3 Bitcoin, and so on, just one person's computer. Nobody's going to bother ascribing real value to that Bitcoin there. But as soon as you put it on a network, and as soon as there is decentralized consensus, now there's provable scarcity of that 1 Bitcoin and 3 Bitcoin and so on, such that people are happy to ascribe real value to it. Now, whether that real value should be $1 or $30,000 is up to debate. But the point is, because of this product architecture, now all of a sudden people are happy to ascribe real value to it. And that, in my view, is the main product market fit of crypto as a product, if you will. And so when you kind of push that out to a bit of a logical extreme, you can build and you build a game entirely on-chain in this case. Basically, you get to create a world, a story, and so on around these numbers that are running on-chain. So you can build a story around Ethereum, you can build a story around Bitcoin. Obviously, those already have its own myths and so on that have been built. But when you build an on-chain game, you get to do that entirely from scratch with your own resources, with your own tokens and so on, such that people are happy to ascribe real value to everything that goes on in there. And that is, in my view, a very different way of looking at it from your traditional games, such as if I made a carrot farming app today and it was spawning 10 carrots a day and so on, nobody would bother ascribing real value to that 10 carrots just because it's not on-chain, it's not crypto, it's not real. And that is the way that people feel it. And so if you kind of look at on-chain games, like that is the different feeling that people get from playing something that is on-chain versus playing something that isn't. We actually see that today, that like when we have a testnet version of the game, sure, it's live and it's a game that you can play. It's just the same as like any other web flash games that you can play from like anywhere else. It's just the same, but it's not live, it's not real because it's not on mainnet, and it's not like, the assets aren't real. And so that's my view of like what the differences are from like off-chain games and on-chain games, if you will.
Yeah, I think the only thing I think that's right. I think it's the addition of value is going to be at least the initial hook to why people play games, right? I think value has existed in games for a long time, but tends to happen in sort of gray markets or dark markets. When you think about like yield farming on World of Warcraft or Diablo or whatever it is, those things happen. Value is transacted, but it's very, very difficult. Publishers don't like it for things like regulatory and legal reasons. They don't want to get money transmitter licenses. And so the idea, hopefully, is that blockchains make it much easier to transmit value across games. Because the value exists, it's a question of unlocking it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. I think a quick like kind of follow up there. I think there's this like taking the devil's advocate or kind of the opposite perspective of like, do we really need to put everything on chain? For example, there's some people who say like computationally intensive things don't need to put on chain, or only certain assets, especially within like play to earn or GameFi, it's only the tokens or the assets, not the actual gameplay.
Yeah, in my view, it's a security concern, not securities, but security in terms of vulnerabilities and so on. And so in our case, when we were running our previous project, basically we had this in-game economy. This was basically, it was a Minecraft server that had tokens that are in there that people can buy and sell different items. And it's your typical Minecraft gaming economy. Sorry, Minecraft server economy where Minecraft has a lot of items. People buy it and sell it to one another. So there is a way that you can do it off chain, which yes, it's computation, and also it's Minecraft, which is an off chain game, right? So so everything was computed off chain, and then there's an oracle that gives tokens back to them based on kind of how they've transacted and so on, and how much time they played. It was a play to earn implementation, so how much you played Minecraft and so on. You would not believe, well, maybe you could, but people were spending a lot of effort and a lot of time every single day just trying to break the oracle. And then if they do, they'd start by salami slicing a little bit, and then afterwards they like come through, and then now they're exploiting like 50 Ethereum like at a time. That was happening a lot. Well, we were catching most of it, but it's like, even one time it's a lot. And so when you have an oracle for an off-chain compute, I think we could talk about ZK rollups, which is probably a little bit different, but I'm not enough of an expert on that as of yet. So, but either way, like when we were doing an oracle there, it was extremely insecure, and people were trying to break it all the time. And it's just like, well, if you can try to duplicate a Minecraft diamond like twice, you could just try to sell it like a lot. So if a diamond is like 10 cents, now you'll just try to like exploit that to get like 500,000 diamonds, and yeah. So that would be the main reason why I would think most stuff have to be on chain. But obviously there's some breakthroughs here that are making it so that security will be less of an issue there.
Yeah, I just think of it as like a design space. I think some people will do like Web 2.5 where it's only NFTs on chain, and some people will do everything on chain, and they'll have different benefits and trade-offs. Some will be more massive appeal. The less on chain, probably the more massive appeal, at least in the short term. But maybe more value you have and more vibrant community you have if more things are on chain. So I think it's just a question of the person who's building the game and the design trade-offs.
Absolutely. So yeah, now digging kind of like the future of on-chain games or games in general, do you all feel like the web can become a solid platform for games again? I know Primordium is built on web for now, and I think kind of for context for the audience, like Parallel trading card game, like they have a downloadable like on Windows. Oh Baby, which is a upcoming games, has like a desktop client launcher, and Illuvium also has a downloadable. Like, what are y'all's thoughts?
So this may be maybe a bit of a naivete from my end, but I think most people have MetaMask only in their browser and don't want to bother figuring out, like, if they download a thing, like, just how do they connect a Web3 wallet to it, and maybe you have, like, I don't know, email sign up, that, so on and so forth. For one, I personally actually like web games a lot, but I know I'm definitely in the minority. For two, these are just client, like, to put the game on the web, like, these are just clients. You can build it in Unity, and then it'd be cross-platform like instantly. So, well, maybe not instantly, but either way. The point is, like, I think the web as a client is good, just because that's where most people do their crypto stuff. And so if they have their MetaMask wallet there, that's just the easiest way of doing it, in my view. And yeah, if there is a need to have it be cross-platform, then there are pretty easy ways to like port a game from the browser to an app and so on.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of development on the browser side from a technical perspective that now enables you to have sort of near native performance in terms of games or 3D graphics on a web browser like Chrome. And so it used to be a technical question, I think, in terms of can you build performant games on browser, and the answer was usually no, at least on the higher end. I think that's changing quite quickly, and so maybe we'll see a renaissance of browser. I'm a little bit skeptical, but I think it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, there's also Phaser that's quite good for browser-based games. It improved our game performance by a lot.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up the builder side of things. I think we're going to dive into the more investor-focused. We'll start off with a heater within the on-chain game space. It says, we wrote, like, most people and teams working on on-chain games right now have never had much or any experience in making games. Are investors supposed to assume they can just learn about game making through trial and error?
Do you want? I'll take it.
Oh, I mean, I can comment a thing or two, but I'm not an investor, so.
I'll take it then. Yeah, I think I differ from most investors in the sense that I'm actually quite uninterested in backing insiders. I think if you have game development experience, it might be even a negative. You have too many biases. Just like you wouldn't want an Activision Blizzard developer building a mobile game, they just wouldn't get it. You want some dude in Finland to build the game who had never built games before. You need an entirely new kind of open design space to think about on-chain games. I think it's been true for most of the history of technology that you want outsiders for almost anything big. I think it's definitely been true in media and games. It's always net new players, not existing players. And so I think it'll tend to be true for on-chain games where the majority of the really big companies will come from outsiders. It'll come from probably college dropouts or something like that. Tim Sweeney, built a lot of the architecture for 3D graphics and now obviously Fortnite. And it's true for mobile games, and it's been true for almost every big shift in games. So like I'm sort of uninterested in investing in insiders.
Yeah, my view is the main thing about younger founders, based on all the folks that I know around me, is that by definition, if you have two college kids working in the dorm room, by definition, it's not a defensible product, but it is, especially when they have a new insight that people who didn't live with the technology or so on, like, just don't understand it nearly as much. And so when you have a new design space, like what David said here, I think that's where people that don't otherwise have existing exposure, existing biases, would probably shine better than people that have been in the space, been trying it out much more.
Yeah, and you see it in the decisions they make, right? I think if you look at the Web 2.5 space, where it's heavily traditional games with NFTs added to it with little innovation, it's mostly existing developers that have built games at previous companies. If you look at people building on-chain games like Primordium or Argus, it's net new founders that have never built games before and are learning. I'd say it's really hard to build games. Obviously, they're the most complex form of media, but it's happened many times before. Most of the big games that you play were built by modders or by outsiders, and so yeah, I'm sort of not concerned.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for those answers. Here's a kind of a point on investing. I think, what's the point in investing in infrastructure that powers games or the games themselves?
90% of the value of the market accrues to content always, or IP, however you want to describe it. But we're at an interesting phase in the market where there's no essentially core infrastructure scalability. And so the question is, do you focus on content? Do you focus on infrastructure? I think that's actually a PSYOP. I think the right answer is actually both. You want to build both core infrastructure while you build content. It's the hardest, fattest startup you can build, but it's actually probably the right startup. The most important companies in media or games tend to build both. If you look at sort of Epic Games, they build 3D architecture, they build Unreal Engine, and then they're also built, Unreal Tournament, and they also built obviously Fortnite. And so you look at that same in kind of Niantic building AR games. They build core AR infrastructure, and they obviously built Pokemon Go. And so I think it's going to continue to rhyme true that the best companies are full stack. They build core infrastructure, world engines or whatever, and then they also build content on top of it. And the content dog foods the infrastructure. And so it's actually a very important two-way parallel street where you have a deep understanding of what's enabled by the technology, and then you're also building and iterating it through content. So you want to own the most valuable part of the stack, which is content, but you also want to have a deep understanding of the underlying infrastructure, which can be a massive moat or loss leader.
Yeah, I don't have too much comments here because I'm not investing, but we as a company, we are dedicating resources to contributing to open source infra. Also you're kind of supposed to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I do think that kind of open source ecosystem is really, really powerful and really net beneficial for everyone. And so here's a question for both of y'all. I think this is a little pretty broad question. I said, is on-chain gaming a different platform, such as mobile or VR gaming, or is it a different means of development, composability, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that the interesting question is on-chain gaming mostly a monetization innovation, or is it a platform innovation or distribution innovation, right? And I think we look at, I think a good way to think about it is like mobile. Mobile was a platform innovation, new ways of distributing to 1 billion plus users, but it was also a monetization innovation in the sense that the App Store created free-to-play gaming at scale, which wasn't really a thing before. And so I think crypto will end up being both, where you obviously have a monetization innovation using on-chain payments, but you also maybe have a platform innovation. And so it'll be interesting to see. I think the monetization innovation is a very obvious pathway that a lot of people are taking, both in Web 2.5 and on-chain games. I think it's more unclear, like the more pure on-chain games, like what the value add is there.
Yeah, we're also seeing building an on-chain game is also a back-end innovation, just architecture-wise, and so yeah, that's the way that we're looking at it.
Awesome. So I think we can probably start wrapping up. I think the final question that I have is really kind of for both of y'all. I was thinking, how can we better align as an on-chain game community to innovate and advance more effectively, both from the investors and builders' perspective?
What do you mean by alignment in this
Just
case?
like moving, like net benefit, moving forward, open sourcing, things that we can do, ways that we can contribute.
So far, I think the community's been pretty nice to everybody, and so I'm not quite sure if there's an issue with alignment for the time being. Like all the investors are very happily trying out everything and also giving feedback. The open source contributors are obviously looking for everybody to develop on their thing, and also trying to get more people on board. And so there's hackathons, there's community meetups, there's so on, and I think all of that is coming together quite nicely for the time being.
Yeah, I'm actually leaving Paris. I'm quite optimistic about the on-chain games community. I think if you contrast it with like the Web 2.5 space, it's very like rugs are probably the right word to use. Like it's very like NFT drop heavy. Feel like I'm getting scammed out of anything and no value being added. And then you look at the on-chain game space. I was at Hacker House on Wednesday, and I'd say 4 or 5 of the top builders in on-chain gaming were all together in the same room collaborating. Even though they're all making different decisions around architecture and design and all this stuff, they're all collaborating, all open source, all trying to push forward what we can do technically on the on-chain game space. And so it makes me very, very optimistic about where we're headed.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This is a great conversation, and yeah, we should be good. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, David.
Thanks.
And David.